Today we are continuing our look into Rebel Clash. This time we're focusing on Milotic V. Welcome back everyone to more from the Stabilize. I'm Mitch and today I'm going to show off the Milotic list that we'll be playing tomorrow in our gameplay videos. And without further ado, let's just take a look at the cards. The first card in the list is obviously going to be 4 copies of Milotic V. With 210 HP, this Water V card is incredibly powerful. Its first attack for Water Double Colorless is 10 plus 50 for each retreat cost on your opponent's active Pokemon. Doesn't seem super strong. I mean, if we were attacking into another Milotic, for example, 2 retreat costs means 2 times 5, which is 100 plus 10, 110. That doesn't seem super good, but there are plenty of ways for us to manipulate the amount of retreat costs that our opponent's active Pokemon have. The second attack is also relatively, it's okay. It's not super strong, but you could potentially attack with it. Water Triple Colorless 150, and your opponent's active Pokemon is asleep. So it's an extra option for you, potentially could come up. But the first attack is going to be the main one. The deck is built around exploiting this attack, and the next Pokemon is to help us. We've got 3 copies of Absol. Absol obviously has seen a lot of play in the past. We're looking at the Dark Ambition ability in this list to increase the retreat cost of our opponent's active Pokemon if it's a basic by an extra point. So that means if we've got a Milotic in the active on our opponent's side of the field, instead of doing 110, we're now doing 160 if we've got 1 Absol, or maybe even 210 if we've got 2. That seems really, really strong as well. And when you pair that with the new Galar Mine, which we have access to in this list, we'll talk about it in a second, then you'll see that this can effectively do over 300 damage, presuming that your opponent's Pokemon is a basic and that you have got the appropriate amount of energy in play. So you can definitely start doing some big one-shots with this deck for sure. One of the problems that the list does have though is that attack cost is kind of high. So in order to get that attack cost off, we are going to be running a 2-2 line of Frostmoth to help us accelerate some water energy. Frostmoth with Ice Dance allows us to attach as many water energy that we want to our water Pokemon on the bench, which means that if we do have 3 water energy in our hand, we can just attach them all to a Milotic on the bench, switch into the active, and then attack for hopefully a lot of damage. Sometimes though, Milotic isn't going to be good enough. Sometimes those big Pokemon like VMAX, maybe some of the bigger kind of GX Pokemon, those tag teams like Mewtwo, Mew, and ADP have a little bit too much HP going for them, so we might be able to soften them up with a copy of Volcanion Prism Star. Believe it or not, I don't actually have a real copy of this card. I had to go and print out more proxies just so I could get one, but this card is really, really strong in this deck. First of all, Sauna Blast does 100 to the opponent's active, and then spreads 20 onto each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. This is good because it allows you to soften up things for Milotic, especially those big VMAX Pokemon. It can be quite frustrating to deal with them, especially since Absol's effect doesn't affect them, but you can use Sauna Blast to limit their HP, kind of reduce it a little bit so that you can get to that 280 or 220 damage cap or whatever it is that you're going to need to get to, depending on what you're up against. Also, Jet Geyser is really strong to be able to gust up something else onto your opponent's active. So you can choose, you can discard a water energy and your opponent switches their active. The only thing that is obviously not good about this is that your opponent gets to choose, but that's fine, because sometimes you just want to take a prize, or maybe 2. You don't realistically need to attack the thing that's in the active. It just gives you a little bit of extra gust. In the last 3 Pokemon slots, we've got what has come to be a little bit of a generic support Pokemon line for me whilst I've been building these new Rebel Clash decks. We've got 1 copy of Oranguru with Primal Wisdom in order to remove cards from our hand and take cards off at the top of the deck. So if we get a really good card in our hand, maybe we get the Eldegoss or the Dedenne, maybe a Frostmoth, something like that, we can put it on top and then research our hand away so we don't feel so bad. We've got 1 copy of Dedenne so that we can draw extra cards, and we've got 1 copy of Eldegoss V so that in the late game we can use Quick Ball to search for a supporter, which we've discarded. So these these three Pokemon have been seeing a lot of play for me so far. They all seem very strong. So that's our Pokemon line. We'll move on now to our supporters. Obviously, we're going to use some supporters that you are used to. Things like Professor's Research and Marnie, both incredibly strong draw cards. Research obviously going to draw 7 after we've discarded our hand, and Marnie is a little bit of a kind of a disruption card for our opponent. But we also have a couple of other supporters that maybe you wouldn't normally see in a deck, but for this one in particular are quite important. We have one copy of Mallow and Lana. Milotic doesn't have a huge amount of HP, right? So if you can heal 120 off of it, that's great. But normally, you're just going to use this card for the retreat. Because one of the things that's really frustrating about this deck is that if you run out of switches, which you will at some point, you find it very, very difficult to get your Pokemon out of the active, because Galar Mine will increase your retreat cost by 2. So we need some extra ways to switch. Mallow and Lana is one, but the other one is going to be 2 copies of Tate and Liza. Tate and Liza is really good in this list in that you can use it as both. You can use it as a draw supporter, and shuffle your hand and draw 5. Not great, but it's better than nothing. And then you can also use it as a retreat card as well if you do find yourself in a position where you need to retreat at some point. Remember, of course, Frostmoth can only use its ability on water Pokemon that are on the bench, so you are going to need to switch quite a lot if you want to get your attacks off. Finally, we have 3 copies of Boss's Orders. This card is a 3 of in almost every deck that we've been playing so far. Being able to guarantee Gust is incredibly strong and will definitely see play. Moving on to our items, our Pokemon support, our Pokemon search line is a little bit thin. We've got 4 copies of Quick Ball and 2 copies of Pokemon Communication. It's not super great, but it's pretty much all that we need. As long as we've got a couple of Milotic in play, Quick Ball's usually enough to grab out one of those, probably start one as well, and then to find the Snom and Frostmoth line. It's pretty much all that you really need to do. The rest of your game plan can just be achieved by drawing naturally into those cards. If you need an extra Absol or something like that to try and get your damage cap up, you can always Quick Ball for one of those as well. I'd like to see a little bit more Pokemon Communication if I can, but, you know, it's not the end of the world that we've only got 6 search cards. It's going to be fine. The reason we have to cut down on that is because we want to have a really thick line of stadiums. This is Galar Mine, as I was talking about before. Galar Mine increases the retreat cost of Pokemon in the active by 2. Which means that if we have a Milotic in the active, instead of having a 2 retreat cost, it has a 4 retreat cost, which goes from 110 damage to 210 damage, which is suddenly a lot more threatening. Then if you've got an Absol in play, that becomes 260 damage. If you have 2 Absols, that becomes 310 damage. So you can see that we can very quickly get some attacks off to take some big prizes with this deck. The key is that we just need to make sure that that stadium stays in play for as long as possible, which is why we play 4. Lots of decks at the moment are playing 3, maybe 2 stadiums. Some are even only playing 1, so if you've got 4 copies of Galar Mine, you're going to be able to get that into play very regularly. We also have 3 copies of Switch. This is another card that I'd really like to see a higher count of, but I've kind of mitigated it with these Tate and Lizas and this Mallow and Lana. 3 switch means that you can get your active Pokemon out of the active, and you can power them up with Frostmoth, which is very, very strong. And I guess all you need to do is make sure that you have Water Energy in your hand, which is where the next 3 cards come in. We've got 2 copies of the new Abundant Bucket, and 1 copy of Energy Retrieval. So the bucket is going to help you find 2 copies of a Water Energy from your deck, put them into your hand, and then the retrieval obviously gets them from the discard pile. So we have a ton of water energy. If we need to, we can use the bucket to search for more, or we can use the retrieval to get some back. And that means that Frostmoth is pretty much always going to be able to fill that 3 energy attack cost for both Milotic and Volcanion Prism. So that's always important. It also means that you can use the bucket to find your energy to use Volcanion Prism's ability, which means you're going to be able to utilize more water energy in a turn, which is always good. You got a retrieval, you can also grab those energy that you've used with Volcanion's ability back into your hand, ready to attach. So these cards are really, really strong in Frostmoth-based decks. It's not just going to be Milotic, it'll be things like Lapras VMAX as well. We use them because you can just search water energy for free, which is really, really good. Moving on to the last 3 items, and these are a kind of a combination of cards like Arankaroots Dene and Eldegoss that I've been putting into a lot of decks. We've got 1 copy of Ordinary Rod, 1 copy of Reset Stamp, and 1 copy of Tool Scrapper. These are all really, really good cards to kind of help round out the list. Tool Scrapper can get rid of annoying things like Air Balloon, because Air Balloon reduces the amount of damage that you're doing, so you can get rid of those, make sure that your Milotic is able to take a big knockout. Reset Stamp is obviously very strong. If you're attacking with 2 Milotics and a Volcanion, you can get your opponent down to 1 prize, and then Reset Stamp them to 1. An Ordinary Rod allows you to get your Milotics and your Frostmoths and your Absols back, so that you don't need to stress too hard about how you're going to be attacking and where that damage is going to be coming from. Over to the energy now, and we have a bit of an interesting energy split. We've got 2 copies of the new Call energy. This is why the Quick Ball Pokecom count is not necessarily the worst thing in the world. When we attach this to a Pokemon in play, we get to, it could be in play or you're active, I need to double check that. Yet again, we've come onto the video without knowing exactly what each of the cards do. That's okay. Regardless, you attach it to one of your Pokemon and then search your deck for a basic and put it on the bench. So even if we haven't got Quick Balls, if we find one of these energies, we can attach it and we'll be fine. The good thing is, since Milotic's attack cost is water, double colorless, you can just attach one to Milotic for free, and you'll be able to find one of those Pokemon that you need. Worst case scenario though, you can always just use a water energy, and this list runs a ton. We have 11 copies of water energy in the list to guarantee that we're getting our attacks off as often as possible. We want to make sure that our water buckets can search out for 2 every time. We want to make sure that we've always got access to them, just in case we want to use Volcanion Prism to gust something up. So there you have it. This is an interesting deck. I don't think it's going to be a top tier one, but you definitely will see some success with it. I think that Milotic is also going to be strong in an ADP build as well, so if you're willing to muck around with that, I'm sure you'll be able to figure out a way that you can get your Milotics to do even more damage than they already can, so it's definitely worth taking a look at. But hey, anyway, that's the list. Feel free to change it up as you wish. Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. So there it is, an interesting list for sure, one that can hopefully deal a lot of damage. If you want to see it in action, check out tomorrow's video where we'll see it in some gameplay against a Colossal deck with Sandaconda V and Ninetales. You can see that deck on the next day, whenever that is. I think it's like Tuesday, maybe, when Blake will run through his deck list for you. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more, then consider subscribing. Click the Sableye button just here. Over on this side are some videos that YouTube thinks that you might like, as well as a playlist for more Rebel Clash pre-release content. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at @theSableyes_YT, and apart from that, we'll see you all next time for more from the Sableyes. Bye.